Kim Kardashian famously pissed people off when she said, "Nobody wants to work these days." But let's talk about the other side of that coin, which is nobody wants to hire these days. In 2024, one of the most frustrating things that you can go through as a human being in this world is just the simple act of trying to find a job. And it's not just the remote jobs or the office jobs that are hard to get. It seems like even a simple job at the coffee shop is becoming super competitive to get nowadays. And with this frustrating job market, a lot of people want a single thing to blame, like, oh, it's the economy, or oh, it's corporate greed, or oh, it's them, they're Democrats. But I don't think, despite all of the hubbub, that there is a single issue that you can point to. I think the truth is that our world is just changing so fast in so many different ways, and these changes are having both indirect and direct effects on the job market. And so in this video, I'm going to be doing a deep dive analysis of how all of these changes in our world, especially these changes with technology, are affecting the job market and your ability to acquire new work. And so if you're on the job hunt right now, just watching this video and becoming informed of these issues is going to make you a more strategic job hunter. But I don't want the entire video to just be an entire gloom and doom analysis of how bad everything is going to be. And so in the later part of this video, I'm also going to give you some actionable steps that you can take to level up your career. So my name is Jose Madrigal, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about my experience before we get on with the analysis, because I was working in human resources for almost a decade, working very close with recruiters, and also it seems like every year I was getting a new promotion or a new job. And so along that journey, I learned a lot of things about how to move up in the work landscape. And so I'm going to be drawing on my experiences from the human resources world in this video, but I'm also going to be referencing some insights from thought leaders in today's world regarding the nature of work, networking, all that sorts of stuff. So first, let's discuss the different ways that our world is changing and those changes that are having effects on the job market today. And I think the most obvious change that we can all agree on is basically this growing world of technology. New technology is basically changing the way the world operates right before our very eyes, and it's having obvious effects on the job market, such as how we apply for jobs, how we do our work when we do have a job, and the types of jobs we have access to or don't have access to. However, there are some sneakier, more subtle, more indirect ways that the job market is being affected by technology, and that is how we spend our free time, the types of interests or hobbies we have as human beings, and the way we interact with other people in this world, which I actually think is a big one that has a big impact on the job market. But before we get into these more subtle changes, let's first talk about the direct ways that technology is impacting the job market. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to technology is automation, because a lot of people are afraid that AI and automation is actually going to replace their jobs, and we're going to be talking about that in today's video. And it's very evident that companies are making a huge effort to implement new machines and new software in their workplaces that is going to automate work that was previously done by a human resource. And this comes as a double-edged sword because sure, a lot of jobs are being replaced by automation and new technology. However, on the flip side, one of the things that is happening is that new jobs are actually being created because of new technology and automation. Because businesses, they need to hire people to implement these new technologies in the workplace. And so as a result, new jobs are being created just because they need people to implement this new automation software. But the problem with these jobs that they implement is that they are not open to everyone, unfortunately. So just to give you a little bit of personal background, when I was working for human resources, my company spent a huge amount of time, effort, and money into implementing a new HR, payroll, and finance system in our workplace. And because of this project, a lot of jobs opened up, but the job openings had two major flaws that you probably don't like. For one, they were contract positions. And so if you wanted full-time job security, I'm sorry, but you were fresh out of luck. And two, the jobs were really tough to get because they required you to be highly specialized. If you wanted one of these project roles, you basically had to be an expert level project manager or an expert level software programmer. So for the person who just wanted an entry level or mid-level office job, you were fresh out of luck. You weren't going to be hired because of this new job opening that was created, right, by this project. And so to make things worse, once the projects were completed and then the teams were let go because their contracts expired, the entry level work was now being done by automated software. And sure, jobs did get created for a temporary amount of time, but then once that work was done, the work was now being automated. So it basically created this huge gap in the marketplace. AI and automation creates a huge gap in the marketplace where entry-level work becomes non-existent because all of the entry-level and low-level work is becoming automated, and the people who are required to implement this automation software are going to be the high-level people. And so, as Professor Cal Newport writes in his book Deep Work, which I definitely recommend if you are trying to succeed in today's world as a general knowledge worker or even an entrepreneur or content creator, Cal Newport says in his book Deep Work, this great restructuring is not driving down all jobs, but is instead dividing them. Though an increasing number of people will lose in this new economy as their skill becomes automatable or easily outsourced, there are others who will not only survive, but thrive, becoming more valued and therefore more rewarded than before. And I think this is one of the reasons why college graduates especially are becoming so frustrated and struggling so much, because it's a market where entry-level job where you kind of don't need experience, you're looking for your first job after college, that type of work is becoming obsolete. And so a lot of these college graduates basically have no way of getting their foot in the door to get their first ever job. But it's not just the graduates from bachelor's degree programs. Basically, even people with master's degrees in highly specialized fields, they are also struggling as well. And just to give you a little bit of an example, one of my first ever career coaching clients had a master's degree in UX or user experience design, and he was struggling to find a job as an entry-level UX designer in his field, even though that's really what he wanted to do. And so he spent 4 years in a bachelor's degree program and then another 2 years in school to get his master's, and in that 6 years he had no job experience. And so when he entered this cutthroat job market, he basically had no years of experience under his belt to prove that he was a highly specialized and highly educated, qualified candidate. And so it's understandable that you get no work experience while you're in school because you're studying, right? You're a student. But in today's market, you either have to be already highly specialized with lots of experience and somehow you have a booming personal brand, or somehow you've just been grandfathered into your office job and you have job security and you have no intention on ever leaving. However, even for the highly specialized people in today's market, those people are struggling to find jobs as well. And so I have a friend who quit her job in 2022 from Apple as a software developer, and she is now on the job market again, and she is struggling immensely. When I interviewed her to ask her about her experience on the job market, she called her job search an emotional roller coaster, which is basically not what you want to hear, right? And so for one, she is competing in a highly competitive field, the world of software development. It seems like everyone and their mothers wants to be a software developer nowadays. And number two, to make things even worse, with the opportunity for remote work, which is supposed to be a good thing thanks to technology, the competition is becoming more fierce than ever before. So she has to compete with job seekers, not just with the people in her local talent pool, but because of remote work options, she has to compete with people from all around the world. So remote work just naturally makes things more competitive for the person who is seeking a job. But on the flip side, for the employer and the companies and the businesses, remote work allows them to be more picky with who they hire, which also makes it harder for the person who's looking for a job. So due to advancements in telecommunication technology, collaboration technology, businesses now have the option to hire effective remote workers, people who can do the same job as if they were in the office, and they can hire them and look for these people from all around the world, all across the country. And so this allows them to scout superstars. They don't want to just hire anyone anymore. They want to hire superstars. They can hire superstars from across the country rather than being limited to their local talent pool. Plus, if they want to save on some extra money, maybe they want to save on revenue, they have the option to now hire overseas because they can hire from a country that has less salary requirements than we do here in the United States or the Western world. And so I think Cal Newport sums up the situation nicely in that same book, Deep Work, which I highly recommend. Again, he says, As intelligent machines improve and the gap between machine and human abilities shrink, employers are becoming increasingly likely to hire new machines instead of new people. And when only a human will do, improvements in communications and collaboration technology are making remote work easier than ever before, motivating companies to outsource key roles to stars, leaving the local talent pool underemployed. So for those of you who are struggling to find your first software engineer role, which is very highly desired right now, I'm super sorry. I wish the job market wasn't like this, because now you have to compete with superstars and you also have to compete with cheap laborers who have the same skills that you do. And so nowadays, again, you're expected to be highly specialized. You're expected to be an experienced superstar with a booming personal brand. Or it seems like what a lot of people are doing nowadays is just working for free in the hopes that that free work will turn into something meaningful. But I don't recommend working for free. So Shirley, as we've discussed, who is Shirley? I don't know. Technology is having a huge impact on the way that work operates, work and labor operates in 2024 and beyond. We don't even know what's going to happen in the future. But let's also talk about the way technology is just shaping the actual job application process itself, because we are beyond the ages of needing to walk into a business, asking to speak with the manager or the team and asking, hey, are you hiring? Here's my resume, shake your hand, blah, blah, blah. And we have been away from that process for a while now. And a lot of people like how easy online applications are, because you can basically apply for a job from the comfort of your own home. And especially since a lot of people are socially anxious nowadays, the thought of having to meet someone in person, no, that's cringe for a lot of people. But we have to ask ourselves, is the easier job application process, because it's all done through the computer, is this hurting our chances? So being able to submit a job application from the comfort of your own home does make it easier for you, but it also makes it easier for other people. And so you're going to have a bunch of people applying for multiple jobs at once. And so this is going to, create a more competitive job market. So not only is remote work increasing the candidate pool sizes, but just the ability to apply for a job online, that is also increasing the size of these candidate pools. And so in this saturated market, it's becoming increasingly harder to stand out in these candidate pools. People have hundreds, maybe thousands of job applications for a single job posting. And so you're forced to ask yourself, how do I stand out, right? And so you've definitely heard those stories of people submitting hundreds of job applications and not hearing back from anyone. And it's basically because of that reason. These candidate pool sizes are so hard that the likelihood of actually landing a job through traditional means is becoming slim to none. And due to larger candidate pool sizes, this is also forcing businesses and companies to start using AI in their applicant tracking system, or ATS. This is forcing them to use AI to screen their candidates instead of having a human review the job applications. So as a job seeker, this requires you to learn yet another skill. Not only do you have to spruce up on your skills for your interview, your resume writing, your cover letter writing, while also maintaining knowledge of your industry, now you have to worry about making sure that your resume is ATS friendly, applicant tracking system friendly. And so this can make your job search much more stressful, because it's just another mental load that you have to carry while on your job search. If worrying about whether or not an employer will like you wasn't enough, now you have to worry about what a computer program is going to think of you. However, the good thing, or maybe not so good thing, is that not every company uses this type of software. But as an applicant, you don't know that. And so you don't know when you're submitting your job application whether they're going to use AI or not. And so a lot of people just assume that they are, just to be on the safe side. And so if the job search wasn't already stressful enough because we're in such a bad job market, now you're under more stress, because now you have to worry about jobs using applicant tracking softwares. And when we're stressed, it reduces our ability to perform well in whatever we're doing, not just our job search, but in the job search, being stressed and anxious while going through this process, it can reduce the quality of your cover letter and your resume writing. And if the anxiety persists, and if you make it to the interview stage, assuming you even make it that far in today's world, you can feel more pressure than usual while you're feeling anxious and stressed while you're in your interviews. And so you're going to perform less good or less well in your interviews, unfortunately. But what about the companies that don't use AI to source out their candidates? Does that make things easier for people in the job market? And I want to say not really, because ATS or not, applicant tracking system or not, there are still going to be hundreds, sometimes even thousands of applicants for a single job. And so that issue of needing to stand out is still very much there. And if you think about it from the perspective of a recruiter or a hiring manager at a company that doesn't use an AI to source out their candidates, they're most likely going to be overwhelmed by the number of applications that they're going to have to go through. And so with an overwhelmed hiring team, they may say, screw it. Let's just hire someone overseas, or let's promote someone internally, or let's give this work to someone who's already working for us, and thus the job goes ghost because they don't want to put in the work to actually hire someone. So speaking of this overwhelmed and overworked recruiter or hiring manager, another thing that I want to say is that an overworked and overwhelmed employee is going to lack attention and focus. And this is kind of another thing that technology is changing about our world. Technology is statistically ruining people's attention spans. Like, let's just face it, for a lot of us nowadays, not just the young people out there, but for a lot of us older folks, maybe people in Gen X above, they are losing their attention span as well. It's becoming harder to focus, it's becoming harder to pay attention, and it's becoming harder to do good quality work these days. And like I said, it's not just the young people who are experiencing this, so I'm sure an older hiring manager or recruiter probably feels just as unfocused as a young person, especially if they're going to be overwhelmed by the number of job applications and resumes that they are going to have to go through. And so nowadays, as a job applicant, you just have to expect that they are not going to give each and every single resume, cover letter, and job application the same attention and consideration as the others. You know, while they scroll through hundreds of job applications and resumes, probably on their iPads no less, they're going to glaze over your application unless something really catches their eye. And so how do you ask yourself that? Or basically, you have to ask yourself, how do I make a recruiter or hiring manager stop scrolling so they can pay attention to my job application? While you either have to have a very weird looking resume design, which kind of makes you run the risk of being unprofessional, or the person going through applications is going to immediately recognize your name. And name recognition is super important on the job search. I just want to stress that. Even name recognition when it comes to writing your cover letter, writing Dear Jose Madrigal instead of Dear Hiring Manager, even recognizing my own name as the recruiter or hiring manager, like that is super, super powerful. And that is a strategy that I've always used. But to get your own name recognized, you either have to know someone on the hiring team, you have to be a well-known and good internal candidate that the hiring team already knows, or you have to network your way in. So as I was writing the script for this video, one of the activities I did was basically list out all of the jobs that I've had in the past, and I'm not gonna lie, out of the 10 jobs that I've worked in the past, only 2 of them did I get through like the traditional just apply and hope for the best process. The other 8 jobs I've gotten as a result of knowing someone, as a result of being an internal candidate, or having a strong recommendation from a friend or colleague. And so this was apparently before the job market took a dump. And so if I had to rely on networking back then, I'm sure that networking is way more important now. And so this begs the question, how can I network effectively and how important is it these days? So as an internal candidate looking for a promotion, like you're already at your workplace and you just want a higher salary or a higher position, networking in that situation is relatively simple. You just have to kind of be a nice person at the office, do meaningful work, and always stay on the lookout for opportunity. Make sure you're checking that job postings website every single day like I did. But networking your way into a new company is what seems to be super, super hard nowadays, especially for those popular companies like Google, Netflix, because those are the ones that people are really trying to get into. Those are the competitive ones. And so considering everything that we have discussed so far today, automation, larger candidate pools, and overwhelmed hiring teams, I think the likelihood of getting a job through those traditional means these days is basically slim to none. No longer can we just apply and hope for the best. We have to put in a little bit extra effort, unfortunately. And so from the networking book, Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, which I recently read, The author cites a study from 1974 by Mark Granovetter titled Getting a Job. And in this 1974 study, basically the persons doing the surveys, they surveyed a group of young men and how they found their current job. And so Farazi writes in his book, Granovetter discovered that 56% of those surveyed found their current job through a personal connection. Only 19% used what we consider traditional job searching routes like newspaper job listings and executive recruiters. Roughly 10% applied directly to an employer and obtained the job. So a potential flaw that I see in this study is that it only takes account of people who already had a job. And so it begs the question, well, what about the job seekers on the market who were still unemployed and were still looking for a job? What routes were they taking? Were they mainly using traditional routes? Were they looking for connections in their network? What were they doing, and what routes resulted in the most interview offers, even if they didn't land a job? But despite the gap that I see in this study, I still find it enlightening because it does show the power of networking. And what surprises me about this study is that it was from 1974. And what surprises me further is that Farazi, who published his book in 2005, thought that the study was relevant enough to cite in his book 30 years later. And here I am, almost 20 years after the publishing of Farazi's book, referencing this study and referencing Farazi. And so I think what this tells me is that we think that today's world is the problem. We tend to think that it is today's world that sucks, that the past, it was better, that the past had more opportunity. The job market wasn't as crap in the past. But I'm sure finding a job in the rapidly changing world of the 1970s felt just as hard. Because if we think about it, as Black Americans, as people of color, and as women were fighting for their rights during the 1960s and the 1970s, I'm sure a lot of these people who were fighting for their rights and actually received their rights through the civil rights movement, I'm sure they were using these newfound rights to find new jobs and to find new work. And so with a bunch of more people applying on the market, not just white men anymore, this created larger candidate pools, which made things more competitive to get a job, I'm sure. Plus, you also have to take into consideration that in the 1970s, there was a bunch of new technology hitting the stage, which is what led to the development of modern day office work. And so the days were also being revamped in terms of the workplace. The nature of work was being revamped. And so like they are for us today, times were changing very fast, but it seems like what hasn't changed is the need to network. And so I can only imagine how the numbers look like here in 2024 and beyond, figuring out how many percentages of people found their job through networking connections versus through traditional means. But if I had to guess, more people in today's job market are finding jobs through personal connections and less so through traditional or direct means. So it seems like the simple advice that I can give you job seekers out there is to just go out and network. But there's another way, partly due to technology, that the world is changing that is dramatically affecting the job market, and that is social anxiety, loneliness, and the way we interact with other human beings. The problem a lot of people have with networking is that they are socially anxious. They don't want to walk up to people at a networking event, shake hands, introduce themselves, and talk highly about themselves. You know, cases for social anxiety have drastically increased in today's world, and I think the way technology just changed the social fabric of human interaction is definitely a big factor. But I also think that the shelter-in-place orders during the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the issue. After the pandemic, cases of social isolation and loneliness rose at alarming rates, and the issue got so severe that in May 2023, the United States Surgeon General labeled loneliness as a public health concern that needed to be tackled. And so in today's world, strangers are danger, small talk is annoying, and relationships are a chore. But these things are also things that can enhance your life, because it is these exact things that can also make strong networks. So for example, strangers, they open the doors to new opportunities. Small talk is the starting point for any type of relationship. And a relationship can lead to a new exciting job opportunity if it happens naturally, right? And so, in today's socially anxious world, networking is tough because talking highly about yourself and boasting your accomplishments is seen as cringe. And sure, you don't want to go over the line and be obnoxious about it, but at a certain point, you do have to talk highly about yourself. As Farazi states, if you hide your accomplishments, they'll remain hidden. If you don't promote yourself, however graciously, no one else will. So if you want to succeed in today's job market, it's time to basically get out of your shell, especially considering how competitive things are nowadays. And so you need to make an attempt to network and show people how great you are, no matter how cringe you think doing so is. And so if everyone else in today's job market is socially anxious and they are unwilling to network, perhaps the fact that you go out and network, even with minimal effort, is going to make you stand out from the crowd. At the end of the day, yes, you are going to have to submit an online job application for bureaucratic purposes, just like everyone else does. But the name recognition that you will get as a result of your networking is going to ensure that your application actually gets reviewed, because that's the problem these days, right? People are submitting hundreds of job applications, but just feeling that they're not even getting a chance. Their application, even though they're a qualified candidate, isn't getting reviewed. And so if you want to get your application reviewed, it's time to network. So now let's segue into the do's and don'ts of networking, and I'm also going to later give you a personal example of how easy a small networking opportunity can be. And the first thing I want you to avoid is job fairs and standard networking events, or like networking mixers, because these types of events give you no chance to stand out. Again, as Farazi says, these events are for the desperate and uninformed. The average attendees are often unemployed and too quick to pass on their resumes to anyone with a free hand, usually the hand of someone else who is unemployed looking to pass on his resume. Imagine a congregation of people with nothing in common except joblessness. That's not exactly a recipe for facilitating close bonds. Instead, Farazi argues, if you're jobless, doesn't it make more sense to hang with the job givers than fellow job seekers? And this is kind of the way that I view the platform LinkedIn. It's basically a big job fair that's full of a bunch of desperate users who are open to work. And I mean, sure, you can make some interesting connections on there if you try really hard, but it's going to be super difficult to make a meaningful connection that results in a job, because it's a platform at the end of the day, a social media platform that is filled with distractions. And so to really stand out in your networking efforts, you need to be unique. You need to stand out. If everyone is going to be going to job fairs and using LinkedIn and messaging a bunch of people on LinkedIn, then go against the grain. Maybe you can actually be that person who walks into the business, even if you are a little socially anxious, and asks to speak with the team. Just by them knowing your face and your name is going to speak thousands as you submit your job application, because it's all about that name recognition, right? But if you're keen on attending events, but you're kind of like, okay, well, if a job fair isn't going to work, then what can I do? Then I would suggest trying networking conferences, or conferences related to your line of work, where the purpose isn't just a big job fair, it's actually to connect over your industry. And so at these venues, you're going to be able to connect with people over a meaningful shared interest rather than just connecting over being jobless, right? And plus, if you go to these networking events, these conferences, I should say, if you do mention that you are on the hunt for a job, you're not going to come off as a desperate job seeker, just another desperate job seeker in the sea of other job seekers, right? And so as a result, people are going to be more likely to help you on your job search if you do develop a genuine connection. Because at that point, once you do develop a genuine connection and you are vulnerable about opening up about your difficult job search, people are going to be way more receptive to helping you out. But one of the downsides about these conferences, especially the very big ones, is that they can be very expensive. There was one I went to recently that only cost like $100 for a VIP ticket, and that was very small. It was local, and so that was really cool. But if you want to go to these big ones, those are going to be the ones that cost a lot of money. However, if you're serious about leveling up your career, I think investing like $100, maybe $1,000 is probably going to be worth the investment if it can land you a very good job in the future. However, if you're unemployed and you're strapped for cash, maybe you can ask your family and friends for help, even though I know that may scare you. But remember, I don't want it to scare you because networking is about building community. And despite this hyper individualistic culture that we live in that tells people like, oh, it's cringe to ask for help, it's cringe to ask for money, the truth is that you can never make it far alone. So, as the Dalai Lama says, we human beings are social beings. We come into the world as the result of others' actions. We survive here in dependence on others. Whether we like it or not, there is hardly a moment of our lives when we do not benefit from others' activities. For this reason, it is hardly surprising that most of our happiness arises in the context of our relationship with others. So I think that is just a beautiful quote on its own. But to extend that thought, I think it is also not only our happiness, but our success that arises in the context of others. Like, you do need to reach out to your network if you want to succeed in today's world, whether you're looking for a 9-to-5 job or you're trying to start your own business or become a content creator. And if you do end up asking your family or friends for monetary help just so you can attend a conference, I want you to look at it this way. The financial investment, or maybe the loan, and also just the public declaration to your family and friends, telling people like, hey, I want to go to this networking event to level up my career. This interaction with your family and friends is going to increase the pressure in a good way, so that way it pushes you towards success. And I think that's a very, very good thing. And if you ask your family and friends for financial help, but they're just like, oh, I can't really help you out right now, I'm sorry, even just the conversation itself may produce a good result, because your family member may say, hey, I can't give you any money right now, but I do know someone who can help you out, who is a manager at this place. Go ahead and contact them and say that you know me. So even just the simple act of asking someone, which is very rare these days, asking for help, even that little interaction can produce a great result for you. And I also want you to remember that you can network anywhere. It doesn't have to be a conference. It doesn't have to be a job fair. It doesn't have to be on LinkedIn. You never know when a random grocery store interaction can lead to something meaningful, whether that's a job opportunity, a new friendship, or maybe you go on a date. You never know when a simple interaction can lead to a job opportunity. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, how are you going to get a job at the grocery store? But I beg to differ. I think that you can actually make some meaningful connections just in random life that you never know where they're going to lead you. And so according to the study that Farazi states, and I think this really, really drives the point home, Farazi cites, and he says, of those personal connections that reaped dividends for those in the study, only 17% saw their personal contact often, as much as they would if they were a good friend, and 55% saw their contact only occasionally. And get this, 28% barely met with their contact at all. In other words, it's not necessarily strong contacts like family or close friends that prove the most powerful. To the contrary, often the most important people in our network are those who are acquaintances. Why is that? Think about it. Many of your closest friends and contacts go to the same parties, generally do the same work, and exist in roughly the same world as you do. That's why they seldom know information that you already don't know. Your weak ties, on the other hand, generally occupy a very different world than you do. They're hanging out with different people, often in different worlds, with access to a whole inventory of knowledge and information unavailable to you and your close friends. So I love this section from Farazi's book because it basically reduces the pressure of networking. And it basically tells you that you don't need to manage a bunch of close and complex relationships with people in your networking efforts. Basically, even the little encounters, like at the grocery store, for example, can lead to something major. So I want to give you a personal example just to finish this off of how easy this can be, because the last job that I applied for in 2023, it was for a full-time remote payroll systems analyst. And just to give you a little bit of context, back in 2022, I had quit my job as part of the Great Resignation, which I wanted to talk about in this video, but I guess we can save that for another one. Let me know if you would think that's interesting. And in 2022, I took a year off from work. And so in August 2023, I went back and dove into the job market and I applied for 2 jobs. And guess how many of those jobs offered to interview me? Both of them. 100% callback rate, baby. And so for one of those jobs, the reason why I got the offer for an interview was because I was a former internal candidate. And so that kind of explains that. But for the other one, which is the one that I ended up accepting for the payroll job, I had made a single email connection. So to make a long story short, I had a friend of a friend who knew the hiring manager for that role. And I asked my friend to ask her friend for the hiring manager's name. And I never knew this friend of a friend. I had heard her name before, but I never met her in person, like not even once. And so after I got the hiring manager's name, I did a quick Google search to find her email. And then I sent her a simple message just expressing my interest in the role. And I also, of course, mentioned that I was a friend of her friend and former colleague. So at that point, the manager saw the email, the manager replied, and all I basically had to do was interview for the position and accept the offer. And so at the end of the day, I asked myself, was I truly the most competitive and the most qualified candidate? I'll never know for sure, but I do know this, that that small email exchange produced a huge result, a full-time remote six-figure job. And I got it in 2023, at the end of 2023, in an apparently crappy job market. And so if a small encounter like that can work for me, I'm sure that it can work for you too. So I want to end this video off by just saying thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. And if you're struggling with your job search, go ahead and check out the link in the description. Maybe I can help you out as you go through this journey. And also thank you so much for the recent increase in subscribers, because a lot of you really enjoyed that video about human resources. I know it's been a while since I've uploaded a video, but this is my reintroduction to the channel. Thank you so much for being on this journey. I'll see you later.